Shalom. Welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar. Today we're going to talk about a very special event, and that is the 70th anniversary of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Nachman Mendel Schneerson. Now, 70 years ago, of course, was in 1950, and the Orthodox community and the Lubavitch community was very small in America. Number one in all around the world, because of course 1950 was only 5 years after the Holocaust in Europe, and that decimated the Orthodox community terribly, and in America wasn't known for their religiosity and the Orthodox Judaism. So therefore, that what we have now and today is a totally different picture. It's something I tell children all the time, because children don't learn history, they don't realize the history, so they think what it is today was 10 years ago, was 50 years ago, 100 years ago, and that's totally not true, because at 1950, and of course I grew up around that time, people thought that Orthodoxy is dead, that American youth want to assimilate, and they don't want to be anything part of religion at all, and that goes through all types of religion. But as we see today, jumping towards today, that the Orthodox community is growing tremendously by leaps and bounds, that they had a meeting at the MetLife Stadium to complete the Gemoras with the Shas, and that was 90,000 people, and I know I have a little bit of a white beard, and I'm a little bit older, but on the other hand, that there were very few older people in that 90,000 people. It wasn't just a bunch of old timers, but it was mainly youth. And therefore, obviously, they're going to grow, and they're going to have a lot more children, and therefore, Orthodoxy is only the ascendancy. How did this all happen? Well, it's not magic in a way. You could say it's the miracle of Judaism, but it became mainly because of Rabbi Nachman Schneerson, Lubavitch Rebbe, will just refer to him as the Rebbe now, and he took a small core of Orthodox Jews and made it into an incredible function today, because Chabad houses are everywhere. And it wasn't easy. Orthodox people don't want to go away from Orthodox community. You have your kosher restaurants, you have your kosher food, and et cetera, et cetera. There's synagogues, and be alone, and people look at you strangely, and who are you, a person with a beard? And that was the way it was in the 1950s, even the 1960s, but the Rebbe was not put off at all from all this. And he kept going full steam ahead, and even now Lubavitch is going full steam ahead also to turn the tide of assimilation amongst Jews, and to, of course, raise the Orthodox specter around the world. How did he do this? Well, many people said that Lubavitch, which are Hasidim and don't like using the term, but ultra-Orthodox, I mean, we'd like to almost say it's normative Judaism and Torah Judaism, but all right, we are very religious and very Orthodox. How do these people want to have Judaism today? I remember one Reform Temple leader says, I don't understand it. Here we are, that we just dilute Judaism to make it easy as anything. We don't say put the tefillin on your arm and head every day. We don't say you have to keep kosher. All these hardships on and on and on. I don't know if they're hardships, but sometimes they are difficult, not easy. Kosher food is a little more expensive, harder to get, etc. You have to get up and pray instead of just running out to work. So we made it easier. So you say something that's easier, people would run after, and things that you talking to me in Judaism, in Orthodox Lubavitch Judaism, you make it so, again, I don't want to use the word difficult because you love what you're doing, but it is obviously more of a trouble, getting the kosher food. And People are running towards you. How is it? And I gave an example, and this is what the Rebbe taught, was just that if a person is going up a mountain, picture it in your mind. It's 90 degrees out. He's going up a hill, and he's carrying a sack of bricks or stones on his back. And he's moaning. You can imagine he's schwitzing, and he's moaning, and he's groaning. He's going up this hill to carry some load somewhere or another. Someone's coming down the hill, and they're saying, well, what are you doing? He says, well, I got a job. I got to carry this hill, these bricks up the hill. So the person says, you want another brick? He says, no, I don't want another brick. I'd rather get rid of my load over here. I don't want it at all. So maybe you'd say, I'll give you half the bricks. Cut off half. Wow, you're a great guy. I love you. Instead of having a full bag of bricks, I have a half a bag. You're great. Thank you. This is incredible. But what happens in a few minutes or half hour? Man, a half a load is still a load. Oh man, it's still hot. Someone comes down the brick and says, what do you want to do? So he says, well, it's a half a load. It's heavy. It's hot out. So he says, well, you can carry only one brick and that's good enough. Wow, this is great. From a half a sack, heavy sack, to one brick. This is incredible. This is light as anything. But again, what's going to happen in a half hour? Who wants to just, you just want to walk up the hill? Who wants to carrying a brick in your hands? So of course, person doesn't even want that. All right, so that's Judaism, the way it's perceived. That's what I'm saying. It's a hardship. It's difficult. All right, you can do half. You do half, that's great, but after a while, who wants to even do that? And even if it's one brick, who even wants to do that? Junk the whole story. Change the scenario only a little bit, because it's still the 90-degree day. It's still the same person with the same strength, and it's still the same sack, and it's the same weight in the sack, so everything is the same except for one thing. And that one thing is, instead of bricks, they're diamonds. So if a person's coming, he's trugging along, and he's carrying his diamonds to his home. So if someone's coming down the hill again, same scenario, he says, hey, he asks the same question, what are you carrying? He says, I'm carrying diamonds, it's heavy. The person says, you want another diamond in the sack? He says, sure, I'll take another diamond, throw it on, I'll take it. What's the difference? It was the same heat, same person, same sack, same weight. But of course, why did he have one person, I just want to chuck the whole thing. Another person says, load it on me, give it to me, dump it all on me. Well, because obviously one was carrying bricks and one was carrying diamonds. So if you have an attitude, the Rebbe said, that you're carrying bricks, well, eventually you're going to dump the whole thing. Who wants to go around carrying bricks around with you? But on the other hand, if the Rebbe taught these Torah and the mitzvahs, the service to God is a privilege, then the more throw it on. And that's exactly what I explained to this Reform person. And he says, I like what you're saying. And that's really the attitude of the Rebbe. Beforehand, that was the tide of assimilation. It was like, oh, who wants to do that? I could have fun on Saturday, and I could eat what I want. Why do I have to be restricted on the Saturday Shabbos? And you can only eat kosher. You can't eat this, can't eat that, and etc. And so many other restrictions. So obviously, if you're carrying bricks, all you want to do is dump it. On the other hand, that if you have an attitude that you're carrying diamonds, so it's difficult, and it costs more money kosher, and you can't go to any restaurant, you can't do this on Shabbos, but it's a privilege. It's a privilege to serve God in the best possible way, and that, of course, is what the Rebbe's changed the attitude of Judaism, and he actually changed the whole face of Judaism all over the world. because of this attitude. People now love Judaism and want to participate instead of saying, let's get out of here, I don't want to do anything. He showed how great and intense that beautiful Judaism really is. And every mitzvah is important, and every Jewish person is important. And the Rebbe taught us that, and that's a main idea also, because again, there's many ideas why people are depressed, and there is so much suicide today, but you might think that, who needs me? 7 billion people in the world, and if there's one less person who needs me, what does it make a difference what I do? And I have a job, and either a machine and a robot could do it better in the future. What am I needed for? And the Rebbe told us that that's the total opposite attitude of what a person should have. You're here in this world for a major reason. And therefore, that God put you in this world for the reason that you're important whatever you do. Every mitzvah you do is important. And that's a very, very important idea, because many people, including a lot of Orthodox Jews, to say that, just feel that, well, it's all or nothing. Either you become Orthodox or just one little thing is really nothing important. And again, the Rebbe taught us a very, very important idea, and that is just every person's important, as we said, and even a single mitzvah, a commandment that they do, and even a good attitude, like they change their mind, maybe I'll be a little bit more Jewish now, that actually has incredible, incredible function in this world, and really the entire universe. That every person is important, everything they do is important, every word you speak is important. You can say words of Torah and davening or helping people with a good word, or you could say bad about people on the opposite spectrum, and depends what you do, and every person has free choice, no matter who they are and what they are, whether they're intelligent is not important, or they're not intelligent, whether they have money, they don't have money, no matter what situation a person's in, even if they're down in the dumps for whatever reason. And of course, I'm a rabbi, and I know people have hardships in their life, physical, spiritual, mental, abuse. I know these situations. I visit many Jewish people incarcerated in prison, so I'm not being Pollyannish. But on the other hand, no matter what situation God has put you in, or put yourself into a situation, then you always have, no matter who you are and what circumstances you are, you can pull yourself out and do just one mitzvah, and that liberates you and connects you to God. Now, another idea, very, very important in Lubavitch, in the Hasidic world, is Jewish mysticism. So it's not just a matter of being a nice person, which of course Judaism does, of course, tell a person. So many mitzvahs deal with charity and being kind to your neighbor and etc. But it goes even beyond that. There is a God in the world, and you can think about God and meditate and contemplate about God, and that's very, very important, to feel spirituality in your mind first and then in your heart. That's very, very important, and the Rebbe emphasized that also. But on top of that, we have to realize when we do a mitzvah, we're not just helping some person out, which of course is great in its own right, but we're actually having ramifications in all the higher worlds. The Rebbe in one discourse gave an example of this, is just that how important we are. We could say, well, don't angels do more than we? Maybe they do in one sense. They pray better than we do, of course. They're spiritual beings. But it's important to be in this world. And the Rebbe gave an example of this by a lever, meaning that if a person wants to take a lever and lift something up, he doesn't put the lever in the middle of the, just think of maybe a car, to put it in the middle of the trunk and lift it up. You go below to the lowest point and then lift it up, and then obviously once you lift up the lower part, everything in the higher part gets lifted also, elevated also. So that's an idea for us, that yes, we are in a physical low world. There's a lot of evil things happening in this world. It's a physical world, which we don't see too much spirituality. There is, if you want to look at it, spirituality, but it's just maybe not so obvious. But if we lift it up and put a little more spirituality, and maybe just a little bit, like we say, it's just one commandment, or it's just one nice word to say to somebody, or it's a nice thought to think about something good, that even though we're in the low world, makes it a leverage in the entire universe, and not, I don't even mean the physical universe, but it means even the spiritual worlds, even to God himself, if you can only imagine. Very hard to imagine, but it's true. God himself has a nachas, you say in Yiddish, a pleasure from that one act, one speech, and even one thought. And another example that you can really understand is that, let's say there's a pond of water. We've always have experienced this, and you throw a pebble in. Everybody's done that. So it's all right. You put a pebble in the water and it splashes, it goes down. No, of course, it's not only that, but it's just all rippling throughout the entire pond sometimes. If you threw a big stone inside in the middle of the pond, and the waves, I mean, not big waves, but the ripple effect will affect in the entire pond. So this is another example that just what you do is maybe just for you personally, but it extends to the entire, again, not only physical world, but the spiritual world. And that's an important point, because one of the bigger Rebbe's campaigns, mitzvah campaigns, was putting on tefillin. Now, he started this before the Six-Day War, and the Six-Day War was an entire miracle. They had a small little Israeli army surrounded, and there's statistics of the planes, how many planes Israel has and everybody else has, and tanks and soldiers and land. So it's incredible odds against Israel. And they even thought of themselves, how will they ever win? But lo and behold, a miracle happened, as we all know, and this little skinny little Israel beat up on all the Arab states all around, and they had a tremendous victory. It was a total miracle. But again, things just don't happen out of the vacuum. The Rebbe foresaw, I mean, people knew that there was going to be a war, but the Rebbe saw a solution beforehand. And he said all boys over bar mitzvah and men should put tefillin on. Tefillin are boxes on the head and the arm, and that's important. Well, what are tefillin? Well, we have to look into the Gemara, the Talmud, and Rabbi Elazar Gadol, great rabbi, Rabbi Eliezer, said that he says that when you put the name of God on you, well, what does that mean? Well, inside these black boxes on top of your head and our tefillin are a lot of names of the Almighty God. And when the nations perceive that the name of God is on you, they will be scared of you. And that's what they need to have, that attitude of having everybody scared. Of course, in any time of a fight, if you don't have a good attitude, then you're going to lose. I always use the football analogy that a lower team sometimes beats the stronger team. How does it happen? If you ever hear the sports analysis say, well, the younger team, they were hungry for the win. Ooh, we're going to try to beat up on the number one team. And the number one team is complacent. Yeah, it's a bunch of low place, last place team. We're going to knock them off. We don't even have to try. And lo and behold, what happens is that hungry low team, last place team, sometimes beats up on the best team. So again, like I say, it's attitude, and that's important for us also, because again, it's not who's stronger, has the bigger tanks. I mean, a lot of times it is. You have to have tanks and planes, of course. On the other hand, that what's really important is attitude. If everybody's scared, then you got them running on their heels, and they won't be able to fight so well. And if you have a good attitude, like you're going after it, then you're going to be a better fighter, and you'll win. So how does the nations of the world and those Arab nations get scared of the Jews? Well, of course, the Israelis, well, they had the name of God, and the Rebbe said to put tefillin on. Now, the point that was an important point, but even further point, we were saying, well, fine, maybe the Israelis on the front line should put tefillin on. All right, that's a spiritual thing, fine. But here I am in the United States, and we all know we're across the ocean, and what if I put tefillin on? Of course, it would be nice to go to the synagogue in the morning, but you're allowed to put tefillin on the entire day until sunset, and you're allowed to put it in your living room, and nobody sees you. Well, who's going to notice me? I'm putting on tefillin in the middle of America. No one sees me, and you say that are going to be affected by it. How can they be affected? I'm across the ocean. I'm all by myself in my room. So the answer is, of course, like I said, the ripple effect. We're not just physical things. Of course, physical things are important. You help out a person directly. You give them some money. You help them out. You say things are going to get better. You appease them from their sorrows. That's incredible, and that's great, and that's direct. But that's what I'm saying. We're talking about something that is spiritual. And something spiritual, the walls of the room do not contain spirituality. You can be across the ocean, and it's going to have a good effect across the ocean also. And that we saw it, the Arabs were scared, and all Jews that were putting tefillin on all over the world. But we're even saying it has even an effect even in the spiritual world, that the spiritual worlds are uplifted by every mitzvah that a person that contains also. So that's a very important point that the Rebbe taught us, to be a spiritual aspect. And another thing that's very important, because that you could say, and people have told me that, oh, Rabbi, what do you have to deal with them? Like I said before, I deal with prisoners. What are you wasting your time? These people are low people. Obviously, they did a crime, something bad, to be in prison. What are you spending your time on them when there's so many other good people that obviously are not in prison? And the Rebbe taught us another important, very important idea, that every person really is good inside of themselves. They have a godly soul, and yes, it could be covered, and really for everybody it's a little covered, because we have a body we don't feel totally spiritual and in tune. We try to be a little bit in tune with our spirituality, but we do what we can in our own spiritual way. But even if a person's on the lowest level like that, and unfortunately there are people that do commit crimes, and there are people who are maybe not a positive force in the community, but still the Rebbe always had this incredible attitude, which is just a Jew is a Jew no matter who they are. And unfortunately sometimes it takes a total test in order to perceive that. A tremendous example would be Daniel Pearl, who was Jewish, is Jewish, and he wasn't religious, but then the terrorists got a hold of him, and they said, give up your Judaism. He said, my father's Jewish, my mother's Jewish, and I am Jewish. So push comes to shove, no matter who they are and what they do, and we all know a lot of Jewish people aren't doing too many Jewish things in their lives, but ultimately the push comes to shove, they are, want to do the Jewish things. Only in their mind, there's a big world out there. Like I say, there's other nice foods besides kosher. It's more expensive. There's nice things to do on Saturday afternoon. But there's a big test. But ultimately, every Jewish person in their heart wants to be Jewish and do the most Jewish things. And that is to turn the mitzvah. So push comes to shove, they will do it. But, obviously we don't want anybody to be sacrifice their lives to Daniel Pearl. God forbid people should be safe from such a torture. On the other hand, what is important is that when you do a mitzvah, when you do a commandment, like I say, even the speech, because some mitzvahs you speak, you say the Shema, you say some nice words to people. Those are mitzvahs. So whatever you do, that will extend your godly soul and make you feel like you're more Jewish. So the more you do, the more you feel. So that's very, very important in a Jewish idea. And the Rebbe totally told us to do that, Just don't look at the Jewish person's exterior. Oh, he's this, he's that, he's something else, but really has a good heart. Remember, actually, in the 1960s, and again, people were hippies, and they had long hair, and they didn't look good, and they're out of society. They're not doing your societal norms. But on the other hand, the Rebbe saw it deeper. Said maybe these people are even on a higher spiritual level, that they're just not going through the actions and just doing everyday life and just going through the motions of what's considered normal life, but what they are actually doing is some rebelling against the world. And those people have an open heart for something deeper. I mean, they were proclaiming peace and love. They weren't saying hate. They wanted peace. Well, that peace and love is really what Judaism's all about. You know, we want to make peace in the world. We want to extend peace to the nations of the world, the Gentiles. They also have in this a major idea from the Rebbe, even though that's based on the Maimonides, but that all the nations should keep their 7 mitzvahs: don't kill, don't steal, believe in one God, set up courts, etc. Don't eat a limb from a live animal, don't curse God. But that we should influence them too. And again, Orthodox and normative Judaism said, well, what do you know, whoever heard of this? They didn't do this in Europe to influence the non-Jews. We have proclamations. I know here we are in the Albany, the state capital, proclamations that the non-Jews should keep their mitzvahs, their 7 mitzvahs. Why are you influencing them? So really the truth is, like I said, it's a Maimonides, which you can't get more normal Judaism than Maimonides. And he says that we should Jewish people should influence our Gentiles, not only Jewish people, our Gentile neighbors. They didn't do that in Europe. Well, they weren't allowed to. The Gentiles would take an offense if a Jewish rabbi or any Jewish person would try to influence them. But we're in America. People are open. I can't tell you how many people come over to me, and I'm talking about Gentiles. Oh, I like what you're doing. We like the Hanukkah menorah in the Four Corners here in the downtown area in Del Mar, and the town supervisor comes out, and the Albany County executive comes out, and everybody likes us, and they're looking for direction also, the American people. So again, that was another action of the Rebbe to influence the Gentiles, and that's important. And once I do mention it, again, that uplifted hand of Judaism, which I said which is Hanukkah menorahs, again, many times, maybe all the time, the Rebbe came out with a new innovation. There was always flack. Oh, what are you doing this for? Who ever heard of this? Why are you doing this? Again, those Hanukkah menorahs, the Rebbe got a lot of flack from people. You're starting up with the Gentiles, and there's going to be anti-Semitism. Well, you know, again, it's been 20 years since we've put up menorahs in the Washington, D.C., and the president sometimes comes out, big officials, like I say, here in our town of Bethlehem, right in the Four Corners, right in the middle of the city. We have, in Times Union comes out, the newspaper comes out, television comes out, like I said, all the bigger political officials come out, and no one said a word against us. And they're proud about having a Hanukkah menorah there. So that's something which was really innovative. Now it's a normative. You see that Hanukkah menorahs everywhere, like I said, Washington, here, there, the malls, but it was a major radical revolutionary idea by the Rebbe, and that was an important point that the Rebbe did. So let's conclude. There's so many things to talk about. The Rebbe is 70 years that he's been innovating and revolutionizing, we can truly say that about Judaism, and we should only continue. And one of the biggest campaigns, the Rebbe always saying, it's not enough just to grow Judaism, but that the Mashiach, the Messiah, should come, and then we'll truly live all together in peace and prosperity. It should happen right now. Thank you very much.